Have you ever heard the phrase, "a picture is worth 1,000 words"? In this video, we'll introduce the power of pictures and how they affect your memory. By the end of this video, we'll try to double your short-term memory capacity. Instead of being limited to 7 things, Miller's magic number, you'll remember up to 14. So let's discuss why visual information, like pictures, are so easy to remember. Have you ever forgotten someone's name? We all have. But what if you ran into that person later in the week or later in the month? You'd probably remember their face, right? You might forget their name, but you easily remember their face. Why is that? It's because the human brain remembers visual information much better than abstract information. A face is very visual. You can picture it in your mind, which makes it easy to remember. A first name is more abstract and harder to remember, unless we include some sort of repetition or association with it. Now, this is very important to realize, that you're very good at remembering visual information, because we can leverage this idea to improve our memory. Let's go over an example. Here's a 14-letter combination that I want you to memorize. We have the letters X, I, B, M, P, H, D, A, C, T, M, T, V, and X. I want you to apply what we learned earlier about chunking and association. Look for a pattern in this 14-letter combination. See if you can chunk it. Now, the nice thing about the human brain is that we're very good at finding patterns. Sometimes we find patterns in completely random information. So what do you see here? If you look long enough, you see the acronyms I purposely placed there. You probably noticed the acronym IBM and PhD, along with ACT and MTV. Oh, and the X's. You've probably noticed that they're at the beginning and end of this 14-letter combination. So we can see a pattern there too. To memorize this 14-letter combination, we're going to imagine some pictures in our mind, and you'll see how this helps you remember things. Let's practice by taking the first part we chunked, IBM. I want you to imagine a guy that works at IBM. What would he look like? For me, I'm imagining a guy wearing a blue shirt because IBM's corporate colors are blue, but you can get even more detailed here. Imagine him wearing thick, dark-rimmed glasses. Of course, I do realize this is just me stereotyping people that work in the IT field, but let's go with it. Imagine a guy at IBM wearing a blue shirt with thick black-rimmed glasses. Next, I want you to imagine that this guy at IBM has a PhD. Imagine it hanging on the wall of his office. Now, in order for this to be effective, you actually need to picture the PhD hanging on the wall. Do you see it in your mind? Next, I want you to imagine that this guy at IBM, who has a PhD, is studying for the ACT. Now, I know that sounds weird, that a guy with a PhD is studying for the ACT, a high school test, but just go with it, because exaggeration helps us remember things. So this is precisely the reason I want you to imagine that this guy at IBM, who has a PhD, is studying intensely for the ACT. And lastly, let's add the MTV part. Imagine him studying for the ACT while watching MTV. Not the best way to study. But just imagine MTV is on in the background. Now review this sequence one more time for repetition. There's a guy at IBM. Picture him. What does he look like with his blue shirt, dark-rimmed glasses? He has a PhD hanging on the wall. And he's studying for the ACT while watching MTV. Not a terrible way to multitask. Now, what about those X's at both ends? Let's just imagine them as bookends to the story we just created. Now let's recap here. Earlier, we talked about the importance of repetition. And we also discussed how exaggeration and chunking help you remember information. Next, we discussed how association and pictures can also be useful to your memory. And now we just combined all of these principles to remember a 14-letter combination. Take a moment to stop and think. Can you still remember those 14 letters we just covered? Pause the video if you want to take a moment to write it down, or just think of those 14 letters in the right order. See if you can do it. If you're able to recall all 14 letters in order, congratulations, you just doubled your short-term memory capacity. Most people are limited by about 7 things they can remember over the short term. But as we mentioned, if you know a little bit about how your memory works, you can increase your memory capacity. Try testing yourself later on today or tomorrow. See if you can still remember that 14-letter combination. If you're able to remember, I want you to remember why it is you remember that information. It's because of repetition, the exaggeration, the chunking, the association, and the pictures that we created in your mind.